Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. This is the weekend edition. Now, on today's show, we're answering a live audience question at a keynote address that I gave earlier this month in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a great question, but first, a quick thank you to our sponsor. The Real Estate Espresso Podcast is brought to you by International Coffee Farms. International Coffee Farms grows and sells specialty coffee in Boquete, Panama. They now have 11 fully operational coffee farms, and they are 100% sold out. They are accepting reservations for farm number 12. If the idea of owning a safe, diversified offshore investment is intriguing to you, check out International Coffee Farms at internationalcoffeefarms.com. That's internationalcoffeefarms.com. We are back here on the weekend edition, coming to you from earlier this month in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I was giving a keynote address to a large real estate investment group in that community. One of the members of the audience had a great question, and his question was, how do you go from investing in single-family homes to being a real estate developer? It's a great question. That's a very good question. Remember when I got in the market? I got in the market in 2009, 2010, probably the best possible time to get into the market, probably in my lifetime. It was hard to make mistakes because you're buying things at far below construction cost, and all you had to do is, not screw it up, and you would still make money. So, folks that just did that and that alone, if that's their only measure, it's not a very good measure. But we made mistakes. We made actually a lot of mistakes. It's quite humbling. But it was at a time when the market was able to wallpaper over a lot of those mistakes. We then, and then what we were buying actually is properties, many from the city of Philadelphia. We bought 15 properties from the housing authority in an auction in one day for $350,000. Our cost basis on a lot of these properties was extremely low. And all we had to do is not screw it up. Now, many of these structures were demolition worthy. Some of them we preserved the exterior structure, demolished the inside, and put a new building on the inside. Now, it was at a time when you had to be careful because if you spent too much, then you were outpricing the market. So we had to be very careful. But we were able to do that successfully within a defined envelope. From there, the leap from that to new construction was a very small step. And then the leap from that to greenfield development was also a small step. I'd also done a bunch of land development projects in between in other cities. So each time you do something, don't introduce 10 new variables. Introduce maybe one or two. Most of the learning happens not within a project, but between generations of projects. So, for example, if you only did one project, and that project lasts 5 years, then you have one project's worth of learning in that 5-year period. If you do 5 one-year projects in that same time period, you're going to learn 5 times as much. And if you do, 32-month projects in that time period, you're going to get 30x the learning. So you want to get volume of learning and try not to take on projects that are going to be too long from a learning standpoint. Does that make sense? As his follow-up question, how do I develop as an entrepreneur? How do I attract investment if I don't have the track record that necessarily investors are looking for to have confidence to invest with me? Wonderful, wonderful question. Here's the answer. Well, so the other part is, and I learned this early on in the tech industry. So back in 2004, I went to acquire IBM's embedded microprocessor division. It was about a $50 million division of IBM, doing about $50 million a year in revenue. And I knew I didn't have the track record to go down Wall Street and raise what we thought at the time would be about $250 million. So I hired my boss. I went and found a guy who ran Motorola's automotive division, which is a $1 billion segment of Motorola at the time, and he had Ford and Mercedes and Toyota and Volkswagen. So he owned the processor business for 52% of the world's vehicles, and I took him with me, to go visit Citicorp Ventures and Credit Suisse First Boston and all these other private equity firms. I had him in tow as someone who had the track record. And the deal was, here's a guy who was at the time in his early 60s, didn't want to make a career out of it, but he was willing to do one more project. And he was willing to tutor me to be the successor, to be his successor in that role. The whole venture was my idea, but I couldn't pull it off on my own, so I hired my boss. Right now, even on South Lake Village, which is the 240-unit apartment project, I feel perfectly competent to run that project. I've got an engineering background. I think I'm smart enough, all that kind of stuff. But when a lender looks at me, who's going to write a $30 million check, they look at me and say, Victor, you don't have the track record. So I found a guy who's built 10,000 units, and he's our partner in the project. He's working with Dave and I. He's built 10,000 units in his career. He's built hotels. He's built office buildings. So when the question of track record comes up, I put Bob up front and say, talk to Bob. Now, I'm there with him, of course, but he speaks with a lot of authority, and he and I are equals. We communicate 6 times a day, and it's great. But when that question comes up, I put Bob to the front. That's how we do it. So, folks, if you're lacking the experience in a particular area, look, business is a team sport. It's made up of complementary skills, and no one person is going to have all the skills necessary to build an entire business on their own. So don't even try. Focus on building the team out with the right skills that you need, and that includes having the right experience base, not just the right skills. Finally, if you're liking what you're hearing on the Real Estate Espresso podcast, go tell 2 friends today. Introduce them to the show. Why keep all this goodness to yourself? The show is available on 15 different platforms. Wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, you'll find the Real Estate Espresso podcast, whether you're on an Apple platform or Android or even on a desktop computer. And if you don't subscribe regularly to podcasts, you'll even find it on YouTube. In the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.